And welcome to our panel. My name is Alia Dakouri. I am an associate professor at St. Paul University, and I will be moderating the panel. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge that this panel has been generally sponsored by the Social Sciences and Humanity Research Center, and it's part of the project on Muslim newcomer and with partnership with the Ottawa Muslim Association. So I'm very happy to present my presenters and thanking them very much for their time. And I asked them each to send me a bio, and I have to tell you guys that they sent me 2 lines. So what I did is I have to dig into their bios and to properly present them. So from my right to left, we have Brother Ahmed Al Khazandar. He is a registered psychotherapist qualifying with a foundation in neurobiology and appreciation of spirituality, diversity, and clinical expertise to treat each individual as a whole. He holds a master's in counseling and spirituality from St. Paul University and a Bachelor of Science combined honors in neuroscience and biology from Carleton, mashallah. He's currently working as clinical counselor at the Ottawa Community Immigrant Services Organization, providing culture responsive, trauma informed individual counseling service to clients in Arabic and English with diverse background in the city. And following that, we have Wala Farahat. She's a registered psychotherapist holding a master's in counseling from St. Paul University. She is a member of the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association, as well as the College of Registered Psychotherapists of Ontario. She has an experience working with clients from various backgrounds, presenting issues on depression, anxiety, trauma, grief, self-esteem, migration, and culture-related challenges, mashallah. And Wala provides service in English, in Arabic, and work with adult, youth, children, and family. Last but not least, I have Samia Zawawi, and she is also a registered psychotherapist. She holds a master's degree in educational counseling and a bachelor degree in psychology from University of Ottawa, mashallah. Samia provides counseling in English, Arabic, and Spanish in adult youth in both individual and group setting. And she has extensive experience working with refugees and newcomer, as well as individual with experience in trauma, anxiety, depression, migration, identity loss, among so many other issues. MashaAllah. Both Samia and Wala are co-owners of Rubik's counseling service. And Rubik's is an organization that is shifting how mental health services are provided in diverse population, featuring as local community builder by CBC Ottawa. They provide research, awareness building, and therapy training to the community at large. And so we are so pleased, mashallah, to have this group of experts to talk more about the well-being. A friendly reminder that if you want to pose any questions to the panelists, there is a barcode in the seat. You can just scan it with your device and we will get your question. Also, there are cards and pens if you want to. All questions are anonymous, so feel free to do so. So without any due notice, we are just going now to the panelists.
Okay, I just want to make sure. Is it working? Because I'm going to get up, so I just want to see if, how far does this go? I don't think it. Oh, okay. I think I can get loud enough. How about you? Okay. So do you want to head there first? So, Dr. Alia, thank you for the introduction. You kind of covered everything. If you can go to the next slide for us, you kind of covered everything we've mentioned from a professional lens. I think you'll need the mic.
Can you guys hear me well? Yes? Okay. A little bit weird for me to be holding a mic, so bear with me. So, thank you for the introduction. We primarily worked with different community organizations. It's actually where Wada and I have met. And in those organizations, we've quickly kind of recognized that there's been a gap in the systems where there wasn't enough support. There's a lack of support for Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC communities, and that's where we kind of decided to open up improvements for ourselves and help support those communities.
Yeah, so, and you'll see that throughout the presentation, we always bring up cultural backgrounds, experiences, things like that, because we talk about wellness and we hear people talking about wellness a lot, but often it's from the experience of very mainstream. So we hear things like, we should take 10,000 steps a day. Do you drink enough water? Are you eating healthy? And all those things are important, but there's a lot of missing context. And for us to actually be able to work on our wellness and for it to be effective, we have to take into consideration our backgrounds, our histories, our experiences, maybe intergenerational trauma. All those things have an impact on our wellness. And without that big picture, we're doing ourselves a disservice, or it makes it harder for us to achieve that goal. So today we'll be looking at the bigger picture and we'll get into the specifics of what wellness entails and the different factors. But we want to start with a little bit of an activity to tie it together. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to start with a series of statements, and we want you to kind of rate yourself. And this is not anything you're going to be sharing. We're not going to be asking you what your answers are, but it's more of a self-assessment so that when you walk away today, you have some idea of where you want to get started or what are some of the points that you want to work on for your wellness. So whether you pull out your phone and open the notes, or you make a mental note, or we have some cue cards and pens if it helps you to jot it down instead. So whatever works for you. But basically, how it's going to work is we're going to go through a series of statements, and you're going to try to think on a scale of 1 to 5 where you think you land for the statement. So 1 being rarely or almost never, 5 being always, and then 3 is sometimes, somewhere in the middle. So we'll give everyone just a couple of seconds to grab the paper or pull out their phones. Okay, so the first statement is, I'm often overwhelmed by my emotions and unsure what to do about it. And you know what? How you're feeling today might be very different than how you felt yesterday, might be very different than how you feel tomorrow, especially with the things you've been watching in the news. Our emotions and how intense they are and how overwhelming they are will vary. But for now, we're just based on today, I'm often overwhelmed by my emotions and unsure what to do about it. Give yourself a rating. Next one.
If you guys can't hear me, let me know because I really do have a lower voice. I find healthy ways to deal with stress. For example, like exercise, prayer, social support, self-care. Again, 1 is rarely, 3 sometimes, 5 always. That was very loud.
Samuel always describes my voice as a teacher's voice because I used to teach. Unfortunately, she doesn't have a teacher's voice.
I don't.
Hello?
There
Okay.
you go. Okay.
This is the break. Can we go?
I take the time to think about what is important in life and my purpose.
Thank you.
We can go to the next one. So we'll come back to these in more detail later.
My values guide my decisions and actions. Whoa, okay. It's a little bit louder now.
And next. I get 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night and feel rested in the morning. I'm like laughing on the inside. I haven't had that in a while. Next.
So I exercise regularly or incorporate some type of movement throughout my day.
Next. I have a social support system of friends and family that I can turn to when needed.
Have a difficult time setting boundaries with people.
Next. I can create a financial budget for the month and I'm able to follow it. She's like, laugh out loud. As we were preparing this presentation, it was actually comical because we'd stop and be like, yeah, we're not very good at this one. Okay, next.
I'm comfortable seeking knowledge about managing finances, support from, like for example, support from financial advisor.
And next. I like to try new things and learn new skills. Next.
I learn about different topics that interest me.
Next. I feel comfortable in my environment. So this could be home, work, school, community. And the last one.
I'm concerned about the impacts on my local, national, and global climate.
Okay. So that's it for the questions for now. You'll see the significance and how we can build on it as we go on. Do you want to sit, stand?
I'll sit.
If you're good with that.
Are you going to be standing?
Can you just switch the slide? Yeah. So first of all, I want you guys to take a minute and think about what it was like to go through those, because a lot of times when we're talking to people about their wellness and they're kind of checking where they're at, we have a lot of messaging or emotions that show up of like, oh, I don't do good enough. How come I can never be consistent? I maybe guilt of like, I should be doing better. Why am I not like so and so? So it's normal for those things to show up as you're trying to quote unquote evaluate yourself. Now, the thing about that is it assumes that we're the only factor, that because I'm not good enough, because I'm not capable, my wellness is suffering. And one of the main takeaways from this presentation is going to be there are so many different factors that impact, and if we don't acknowledge them, we won't know how to navigate them to be able to overcome them. If you're thinking of yourself as the only factor and that you're not good enough, it makes us stuck. So we want you to see the bigger picture as we go on, and we'll remind you of this at the very end.
All right, so can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. So as Wala was talking about the different factors, we try to put them all in this wheel that's called the wellness wheel. We'll start with the emotional wellness. Oh, sorry. Is that it? Oh, it says in black. Thank you. So let's start with the emotional wellness. What is emotional wellness? Emotional wellness essentially is our awareness of our emotions and how we manage it. So this refer to the first two questions that we put up in the slide.
So those were I'm often overwhelmed by my emotions and unsure what to do about it. So you see the first number you wrote down, that's what it's referring to. And the second one was I find healthy ways to deal with stress. So exercise, prayer, support.
Yeah. So as people of color, minorities, immigrants, we often have a lot of experiences, like so many different lived experiences. Some of us have experienced migration, there might have been war, loss, discrimination, all of those pieces, and that has a huge impact on our emotional well-being and our emotions and how intense they show up or how we manage them. So now let me preface, emotions are very important for us to know about because they give us information. They tell us what's happening for us. So, but when we don't have, or when we kind of are not super aware of what's happening for us, it's hard for us to attend to it. And that becomes a tricky part. And you might notice it will start to pile on and on, and sometimes you get a little bit like these overwhelming feelings and some of the explosive feelings, the intensity of it. We all know what's happening right now in the news with Palestine, so a lot of us might be feeling so many different forms of emotions like anger, frustration, overwhelmness, and sometimes we're feeling them all at once. And a big part of what we want to be able to do is being able to recognize what are those emotions that we're feeling so we can slowly start to attend to them. So a lot of us as therapists, they get to ask us questions like, why is it so important to talk about emotions? Or why do we need to name our emotions? Because if we're aware of it, then we know how to attend to it. When I feel angry or when I feel sad, I'm going to need different things. When I feel angry, I might need a little bit of an outlet, maybe going for a walk, going for a run. something to get that energy out when I'm feeling sad or when I'm feeling afraid. Afraid is normally associated with safety. I need to feel safer. So if I'm aware of these emotions and I have a little bit more understanding of how I'm feeling, then I can slowly start to attend to them. And that's really, really important. Um, if you look at the two questions,
So for the first question about often getting overwhelmed, if you scored higher on that question, or for the second question about finding healthy ways, if you scored lower on that question, this is one area of wellness that you might want to pay more attention to.
one of the things that you guys can start doing is essentially just kind of recognizing what's happening and naming it throughout your day. And that just builds awareness. And it's something that we often tell our clients. It's a very small, tiny, tiny little trick, but it's really helpful. Just start naming them. What is it that I'm feeling? What am I experiencing right now? And build on that.
And to that note, Samia was saying earlier that when we name it, we can attend to it. So a lot of times people think that therapists talk about feelings too much. But the reason we do is if we're not aware of them, the impact we see in so many different ways. So when I stop and say, I'm angry, I don't have to necessarily go to, but why am I angry and why did it annoy me, and get into my mind and kind of the thoughts start running. Yeah. What we want to do is just start by practicing to name it. The better we get at naming what the emotion is and knowing it, the more we can attend to it after. So that's the first step if you scored lower on those two. So I'm going to move on to spiritual wellness. And the two questions that we're referring to that is I take the time to think about what is important in life and my purpose. And the second one was my values guide my decisions and actions. And spiritual wellness is essentially what the questions were. It's a sense of purpose, it's meaning, it's connecting to something greater than ourselves. And often that can be religion or God. So, as Muslims, faith is a huge part of our lives, and it's a source of comfort, and it keeps us grounded. And essentially, what religion does is it gives us a sense of purpose. It tells us what our purpose is. It gives us meaning, and it connects us to other Muslims and to God. So it also gives us that connection. Now, just because we're Muslim or we have a certain faith background doesn't mean that we have amazing spiritual wellness. The reality is, our experiences impact our spiritual wellness. Our upbringing and how we were taught religion impacts our spiritual wellness. So we have to take those into consideration.
So I'll give you a little bit of an example, like a personal story. You'll get to know a little bit more about me. When I was in my teenage years, I lived in Denmark because of my dad's job, and we had just recently moved there. And it was around the same time that 9/11 happened. And mind you, I'm trying to kind of find my footing, find a space of community, especially at school. And I think I was maybe, there were 3 of us that were Muslim in that school. And then 9/11 happened, and then a lot of people very quickly started to kind of see us differently, and there was a lot of conversations that were going around in the background, a lot of discrimination, a lot of hurtful things that you could hear people say. And so I found myself in a very in an interesting position of like, I want to connect because I don't have friends. I'm making new friends. This is a new environment. Denmark is totally different than where I was living before. So I'm trying to find my footing of like, where's my connection? How can I connect to them? But also at the same time, I'm like, my faith and my connection to faith. And it was a scary time for a lot of us, and for myself included, it being in that school setting where I started to kind of distance myself a little bit when people were asking me, where are you from? What's your faith? I would stay quiet because there was so much fear around it. So I started to disconnect a little bit more. It was only, one thing that was really helpful for me was when coming to Canada, I would start to kind of look at different pockets of people that I can connect with, that can relate to my experience and say, oh yeah, I've experienced that too. And that was really scary. And that was very validating for me. And being able to have those group of people where I can have conversations about them, being able to name it like this is, and call it out, essentially say this is Islamophobia, it really helped me connect back to my faith in that community. But it took time because of what I experienced at school and because of all the fears that were happening, and also because I'm trying to find my space in those settings. And isolation is a big thing, right? Like you always want to connect when you're in that developmental stage, I guess, in teenager years. So that's an example of what I was talking about in terms of our lived experiences having an impact on our connection with our spiritual faith.
And I think you bring up an important point where as Muslims, this piece of Islamophobia, when I was saying at the beginning, if you feel bad about how you scored, remember it's not just you. This idea of I'm not good enough, or in Samia's case, this idea of, oh, I'm not being religious enough, it wasn't just about Samia not being religious, right? It was about the environment. So being able to put labels like, oh, this is Islamophobia, this is racism, this is discrimination, it actually helps us overcome it because then we know what we're addressing. It's not just something's wrong with me. So that naming piece is really, really important. Now, another thing that shows up with spiritual wellness specifically is the upbringing, right? And how we're taught about religion. So sometimes there's a sense of shame associated with religion, feeling not good enough. Whether that's just internalized or whether it was how we were unfortunately taught religion, intentionally or unintentionally. Sometimes we get the messaging when we're kids that be careful because God is watching and he'll punish you. Or God is there to decide, like it almost feels like a point system as a kid. I don't know if you guys felt that way, where it's like you get good points or bad points, right? And if I got a bad point, then I'm a bad person. So sometimes the way we're taught religion, if we don't revisit it when we're older, actually impacts our connection with it. Because if religion makes me feel bad about myself, like I'm not good enough or I don't deserve God's mercy, then I will avoid it because I don't want to feel bad. I'll distance myself from it. And it impacts our connection to God, to the faith, and to the community, that faith community. So if you felt that in terms of sense of purpose or values, you scored lower on that, or if you can relate to some of what Samia said in terms of personal experience or the shame piece, I would suggest that you start with what's your view of God? And where did it come from? Is there a part of you that sees God as this angry, punishing, all powerful God? And is that how you view him? Because that impacts how I feel. It impacts how I show up when I'm praying or doing any kind of ritual or engaging with the community, even. And if that's the case, and that's what I was taught, then I need to go back and educate myself, especially as an adult. I need to go back and see for myself in religion. And often people will say, it's so overwhelming. Where do I start? How do I educate myself on religion? And because our religion is based on this idea of worshiping God, I would start with who God is. So often I'll talk to clients about if you see God as this punishing, all powerful, out to get you, is what a lot of us think. And you don't see the whole piece of like, God actually cares for me. God's watching over me. Then I would start maybe with just learning who God is through different educational streams, and you can find different ways to do that. And sometimes the best way to start is the 99 names, because there are different attributes that you can look at and delve deeper in that will give you a relationship beyond just the punishment and the accountability piece.
Okay. So moving on to physical wellness. Essentially, what physical wellness is physical health. It includes our nutrition, our sleep, our movement. Now, you see a lot of things on mainstream. Can you not hear me? Okay, louder. um, in terms of like going to the gym or yoga or eating healthier kind of meals, and all of these are great, don't get me wrong, they're really helpful, but sometimes it's okay to also look into like maybe our cultural spaces and see if there's certain things that was passed on culturally that could help with our nutrition or could help with our movement. For example, when I was living in the Gulf for a while, my brother, there was no such thing as gyms back then. I don't know if anybody can relate. It was more so sports, and sports was a big thing. And so they would play soccer all day, and that's how they got their movement. And other people got it very differently. So there's a lot of wisdom in that as well, or knowledge in our past or generational past of like how movement, how nutrition, how health was talked about, and it's okay to dig into that space as well. For example, me and Wala were laughing about this. I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but my mom used, is it called vapor? It's called vapor here, right?
The vape, what's that like? It's like
The Vicks.
yeah, the
Anybody
Vicks
can know Vicks? The Vicks, yeah. My mom used it for everything, and I kid you, it helped. I mean, I'm sure there's sometimes where I needed to go to the doctor and things like that. But there is that, natural remedies that really help.
My aunt says to do this.
Yeah, or the honey with a lemon when you're feeling cold. And so there is no one specific way. And I think that we get so caught into the social media of like, what is the right way of doing it? But it's okay to just kind of look around and have conversations within your own spaces and be like, it doesn't have to be this way. It could be other things as well. I do want to note one thing that's really important, that is people of color, we also you might notice they might have some difficulty sleeping, and physical bodies or like our physical body or mobility might be feeling a little bit, what's the word? Exhausted, tired, etc.
Can I pause you to remind them of the questions?
Oh yes, go ahead.
So the two questions for that section, one of them was, I get seven. Oh, it got louder. I get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and I wake up rested. And the other one was I exercise regularly or incorporate movement, some type of movement in my day.
So our experiences in the past, like if you've experienced trauma, for example, or a lot of difficult stresses or challenges in the past, that has a huge impact on our physical well-being as well. So I'll give you an example. When we were working in different organizations and we saw the Syrian refugees coming in and they were struggling with so many different things, and I think one of the questions that a lot of us would be asking is like, "How are you feeling today?" And they would say, "Oh, I'm like emotionally. Like, how are you feeling emotionally?" Like, "Oh, I'm completely fine, but like." I think I need to see a doctor because I'm starting to feel pain in my stomach and I get headaches and I can't sleep. I think there's something physical there. I want to note that there's a body mind connection that we have where different factors can have an impact on our physical well-being that's not necessarily associated with like
Physical
a
illness.
physical illness. It could be symptoms of trauma. It could be symptoms of so many different things. And so it's important to keep an eye on that, especially like if you have experienced trauma in the past, there are some of the symptoms include not being able to sleep. You will hear a lot of like, I get headaches often. I get stomach aches often. My body aches a lot. I'm foggy, etc. And then they go to the doctor and the doctor's like, you're completely fine. There's nothing there. If that is the case, if anybody's noticing some of those pieces are showing up for them, then I would invite you to maybe speak with a health practitioner, or access any mental health services that can give you a little bit more insight on that body mind connection and how that functions and how it has an impact.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point because often with physical wellness, especially when we're talking about sleep or exercise, again, it becomes I'm the problem. But we know that trauma, and not just trauma that you've experienced, but intergenerational trauma, so the
Yes.
trauma your parents went through, the trauma your grandparents went through, actually impact your body because trauma is stored in our bodies. So until we address it and work on that, we see some of these physical symptoms that actually impact the sleep, that actually impact your mobility and your ability to consistently be exercising or doing other movement. So again, think big picture. Don't think I'm the problem. Okay, what else is happening here and how can I address it? Okay, so we'll move on to social wellness. And social wellness is the quality of our relationships and social connections. It's our support system, it's our sense of belonging. And the questions we had for that, or the statements, were I have a strong support system of friends and family that I can turn to when needed. And the second one was I have a difficult time setting boundaries with people. And again, as immigrants, as people of color, we can't ignore the fact that when you leave a country and come to a totally different country where everything is foreign, where the systems are different, where the connections that you built from childhood, the people, the neighborhood, the people that understood your lived experience and lived it with you are no longer there. And you're building new connections here with people that it doesn't feel the same with. And that's what I hear from clients often, of no matter who I meet or what friends I make, they're not like my childhood friends. They're not like back home friends, right? So it feels like something's missing. There's a sense of loss. And we need that connection with people that have similar values, similar views to help with our sense of belonging. And it takes time to build, so it can be tricky. But we need to find pockets of that to be able to build community, and it plays a huge role in our social well being. Now, where people sometimes get stuck is they'll say something like, well, I can't find someone that I feel like actually aligns with my values and my views. And it's really hard to do. And I feel very isolated, or these people just, I can't connect with them. I can't find what I'm looking for. I can't find someone like me. And as a second generation immigrant, for me, a lot of times that experience, and a lot of second generation immigrants talk about that experience of no one gets me is very familiar, right? Because there's the whole, okay, my parents have their histories they talk about and that are important, but it's not necessarily my experience. And then there's the context I grew up in that I am able to deal with, but also not exactly my experience, the whole not fitting in. So trying to get a sense of community, often where we get stuck is when I'm trying to find everything, someone exactly like me that gets everything that I'm experiencing, that has the exact same values and faith background, is very unlikely. If you have someone like that, it's probably one person, maybe two. But if we want to build a social support system, if we want to build social connections, then we need to be able to find pockets of connection with different people. There might be one person that I connect to or that has the same in a specific thing. There might be another person where we have shared interests. There might be another person that gets a certain experience that I've been through and we share that in common. So instead of trying to find everything in one person, which can be very isolating, see if you can find pockets in different people, and that's how you build a more holistic support system around you or a sense of community.
The next one is a tricky one, the financial wellness. I think was
There's an LOL over there.
there was an LOL there.
Questions? I'll run through the questions.
Sorry?
I'll just remind them of the
yes,
questions.
please do.
So the first one was I create a financial budget for the month and I'm able to follow it. And we really laughed as we wrote this. So you can see one of the things that I need to work on when it comes to wellness. And the second one was I'm comfortable seeking knowledge about managing finances, for example, support from a financial advisor.
So, what is financial wellness? Essentially, it's financial stability to be able to house, to feed our families, and have knowledge about how to manage our money and plan for the future. But as immigrants, there are many more barriers to finances that we experience. For example, like degree equivalency. Is it called degree? Degree equivalency. We saw so many immigrants coming through with such amazing degrees of in their back home that they've practiced, but they're not able to practice it here, which sets them. It makes their journey a lot more difficult. Finding a job can be really difficult, or progressing in the job can be difficult because of discrimination, racism, etc. And that's a reality that we experience. There's also language barriers that can happen. That can act as a barrier as well. And I'll give you a little bit of an example. When we worked for the community, one of the community organizations, they had hired a therapist who came from Latin America, and she's an older lady, and she's had a lot of amazing experience back home and got her more experience here in Canada. And she had an accent, rightfully so. She's from Latin America, and we're noticing when we're sitting down in meetings and having conversations with our managers would always kind of be like, wait, what did she say? Or like, I don't understand what she's saying. So therefore, I think we shouldn't put her in this position, or I think we shouldn't give her this position because like people will have a hard time understanding her. And the truth is that I don't know if
we both understood her
perfectly, but this is a person with a lot of wealth of knowledge, a lot of experience and lived experiences, but was not able to, I guess you want to say, progress and get better jobs or promotions because of this. And it's a huge reality for a lot of us. So if any questions or the topics of finances always make you feel uncomfortable, which it does, or you try to avoid it, we really invite you to just kind of look at and reflect on the underlying beliefs of what might be happening for me in terms of how I understand my relationship with finances and money, etc. So, you might have thoughts of like, I'm not capable of making more money. I talk to a lot of my friends and family members that have this mentality of I'm not capable of making more, or I don't deserve to make more money. If those show up for you, challenging the narrative and thinking about where this message is coming from and what I can do to change this message is really important. And a big part of that might be educating ourselves with financial literacy, accessing support systems, different community services that can give us a little bit more information about this, or even connecting with a financial advisor.
And I think as a general note, if anything makes you, in terms of the wellness topic, if a specific topic or specific questions make you uncomfortable and you feel like you want to avoid them or run away from the topic, that's a sign that you might want to do some digging, right? And when I say digging, that might be with a therapist, that might be by talking to a friend, it might be, like she said, financial
Picking
literacy,
up
a book, education.
Yeah.
But when something feels uncomfortable, we run away from it. It's okay to like gently dabble in it because there's something there that we're stuck on. So the next one is intellectual wellness. This one's a really interesting one. And the two questions about that, or the statements, were I like to try new things and learn new skills. And the other one was I learn about different topics that interest me. So intellectual wellness is basically recognizing our own creativity and finding ways to develop our knowledge and skills. Now, one of the things that always stands out to me as a therapist is when I'm dealing with diverse populations, they often talk about, like, I'm almost like surprised sometimes by the amount of creativity and the amount of knowledge they have and life skills that they don't see. Because I think as people of color, we're so used to minimizing it. Like, yeah, this is just how I do things. Yeah, everyone does this. And we just do the job, we get the job done, we get it done well, and then we move on. But we don't stop to think, wait a second, I have specific kind of creativity that's unique to me. We talk about how immigration is difficult, how we have barriers, how we have to jump through hoops, like Sammy was describing with financial. We talk about trauma sometimes, but we don't necessarily talk about how the challenges we went through, either after immigrating or before, actually build our resilience and our skills, and they help us navigate the world in a unique way that other people can't. And that's something that a lot of people don't think about or don't see. And as I say this, if some of you are thinking, yeah, I can't think of anything I'm creative at or good at, I challenge you to find something. Write it down, and your challenge is to actually find something, whether it means talking to a family member or a friend and seeing how they would describe you or your skills, or trying to dig back and remember any kind of feedback or praise you got from like a professor at school or at work. We all have it, but we tend to minimize it. And that impacts our intellectual wellness. Now, on the other hand, when it comes to trying new things, often people will say it's difficult for them to try new things because they either have low self confidence or they get really anxious. And we don't have the time to delve too much into this, but remember that trying new things and overcoming them or working on something and developing a skill and getting better at it is how we build the confidence, and it's how we increase our tolerance. And the more I increase my tolerance, the more I can manage the anxiety. So start with something small, start gradual, something new, something different, but start somewhere. And again, feeling a little bit uncomfortable is okay. You can do it while you're uncomfortable. The discomfort doesn't mean I need to stop. Keeping the discomfort there and continuing is how I slowly build that tolerance and overcome it.
Okay, last one, I think.
Yes.
Environmental wellness. So this includes the environment we're at daily, like home, work, school, and it also includes a natural environment, environmental consciousness. Let's start with the environments that we're in daily. If you're feeling uncomfortable or othered or even unsafe in our environment, I'll just use work as an example. It has a huge impact on our emotional well-being, on our physical well-being as well. So if you're noticing at work and you're experiencing a lot of microaggressions, discrimination, racism, it it starts to pile on. But what we've also started to notice is that a lot of us will just be like, yeah, it just happens. We've experienced it, and we start to minimize it. But it has an impact, right? So again, going back to what Ola was saying with the other parts of our wellness, um, being able to talk about it, connecting to communities where we can have similar experiences and talk about it can make a huge impact. So when we worked, I'll just give you a little bit of an example to really hit it home here when it comes to work. When we worked in different community organizations, we've worked with a couple, and there's some that have been really challenging and difficult, where both Willa and I have experienced microaggressions and racism and Islamophobia, and it really started to take a toll on us. Um, what helped for us, and what you can jump in whenever you want to, is finding your people. So as a collective othered, what we did, we basically, and there were different colleagues that came from different backgrounds in the agency, and it created a sense of, we created a group where it created a sense of belonging for us. And it was little small things like checking in on them, like getting them coffee. Sometimes someone will bring a specific form of food, or that they were cultural, that we would share it and would eat it together, would talk about experiences, gathering together. That really helped us feel like there's something there as a community where we can advocate for ourselves, where we can be there for each other and have each other's back when all of these challenges was going around us. Now, it's not always common. You might be in a space at work where this doesn't, you might not have those pockets of spaces where you can have that shared experience with others. And sometimes when we are in that position, it's okay to reflect and wonder whether for us to take a little bit of a step back. Maybe this is not an environment that I can be in for a longer period of time, and maybe I need to take some other moves to move forward from this.
Now, when it comes to more of the natural environment, so when we're talking, first of all, as Muslims, our religion also really emphasizes environmental consciousness. And we could probably do some more work here. So there are a lot of ahadith about the importance of preserving the environment, avoiding excess consumption, protecting like natural resources and living things. And we know that our environment impacts us every day, the air we breathe, our kids' future. We know there's a climate crisis. We know all that's happening. But if you were on the lower end of the question about being concerned about the impact, then we need to start with education. And I'm going to start with myself because I need to be able to practice what I preach. So, something I added to my list this week is actually educating myself on the current climate crisis and looking at it from a religious perspective in terms of what are the ahadith, what's the religious significance, because that's also a part of what impacts our environment and our wellness on a larger scale. So, that in a nutshell, kind of very quickly covers the different areas of wellness. And what we want you to do is, if anything really resonated with you in terms of a specific one that you felt like, ooh, something about that hit differently, to take the time on your own to kind of sit with it. And whether it was an advice we gave or doing your own research, Samia mentioned books, sometimes it's podcasts, like I said, talking to people, therapy, whatever it is, give yourself some time to work on that piece. And I know there are a lot of nuances and stuff, but what we really want you to walk away with is it's not just about self-care. It's not about going to the gym or getting a personal trainer. It's not about going on a run or a walk. You have to look at the bigger picture, because when we minimize the impact of the other stuff, we get stuck. If you're aware of what's impacting you, you can find a way to navigate it. So I want you to remember that. And I think we'll switch over to more panel style from now on.
Do you want to put this in the middle?
Yeah, sure.
Just a friendly reminder, everyone, that there is a barcode that you can scan on your seat if you have any questions. It's anonymous, and we want to take advantage of having 3 psychotherapists in the house. So any questions related to the panel, we'll just receive it and we'll attend to it. Okay. Now back to you, Ahmed.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really good example of having different backgrounds, but also finding the connecting piece. And language is a huge one. You mentioned also cooking and different, like watching different shows. So we need to get creative with how we connect. And I think the fact that you have that relationship that stayed long term is also really nice. Very telling.
And also, like, there is a piece as well, like with that, is that like at times as well, it's like when the language is not yet being learned, at times even even like at places where we're learning the language itself, that would be even like a great place where people would find like a sense of community, because that's basically a shared experience where people are learning the language together, and they're coming through like from many different places in the world as well too. So even if the language is not yet there, the experience of learning the language itself would be quite a fantastic way to have that sense of community start to basically develop through that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for that perspective. As we wait for questions to come in, do you have any, Dr. Ali?
Sorry, it seems that the network or the setting is not working. So if you don't mind, I have pens and cue cards, and I would be happy to pick any questions if you wish.
In the meantime, I guess we can start by talking a little bit about, because we talked about wellness, but why is it so important, or why you should make it a priority? I don't know if any of you wants to tackle it first, or if go ahead.
So I can mention something about that, is especially when it comes to wellness. It's at times when we might see it as either I would have it or I would not have it. Either it is existent or not. So that when when it is only on that either yes or no, either absence or maybe presence of it. It is also it is usually beyond that. It is usually which direction are we facing. At times we might have wellness at the moment, however the direction being going, it's towards it is almost that of not paying attention to it, or even neglecting the wellness itself. And also usually I wanted to mention, when it comes to wellness and even health conditions, like Sami and Wala had mentioned about the effect of trauma, how can that be, and also the influence of the culture. Usually with that, when it comes to experiences of pain, experience of suffering, trauma, any form of disorders that are there, yes, they are health conditions. They are health conditions. At the same time, when we look at the big picture of it, we would see where where are the matters that are related to political influences or even cultural influences to that state of wellness. So these are pieces to really see how they're tied. It's not only a vacuum of the person itself. It's basically it is the whole experience that they're living in as well too.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think also in terms of importance, we mentioned at the beginning that wellness is essentially your quality of life. And we need to make improving our quality of life a priority, because it impacts how we show up in different spaces, it impacts how we connect with others, it impacts future generations. So a lot of times we don't necessarily talk about the I mean, you've probably heard the term breaking the cycle because it's everywhere. And it's become kind of just, everyone says it, but what does it actually mean? And unless I actually make my own wellness a priority, it's hard, or it probably won't happen that the cycle breaks. So whatever I'm passing on, whether it's a certain underlying belief, like Samia was talking about with money, or whether it's trauma responses, whether it's anxiety, whether it's how we manage emotions, a lot of times kids are observing parents or are picking things up from their environment. And unless wellness is a priority and our quality of life is something that we actually work on, that cycle continues. We pass it on to the next generation. So it's important for us, it's important for the generations to come. Often when I'm talking to parents, they'll say, oh, I don't matter. It's my kids. I do it for my kids. And I'm like, well, no, you need to matter because when you matter, your kids do better. So it's not just a matter of how am I doing today, it actually impacts future generations and how we break that cycle. So wellness needs to be a priority. I'll read a question that came in and then I guess whoever wants to start. So it says, how can I navigate my emotions with the way things are in Gaza? I'm experiencing survivor guilt and don't know what will happen. I'm experiencing a nervous break and I am confused what will happen moving on. I have donated, I have raised my voice for awareness, and I am praying. So the question is, how do I navigate my emotions with what's happening in Gaza? Anything you want to, or should I go first? Sure, okay. It's a hard one. As a therapist, the last week and a half, almost every Muslim client that walked into my office talked about this. And at least half of them just walked in and broke into tears. So, first of all, I want to normalize the reaction. If you're feeling a lot more intense emotions, a lot more heightened emotions, and a range of them that you usually don't experience, that is normal considering what's happening in the news and what you're exposed to. So, you're not the only one. That's the first thing I want to say. Second point, what we're exposed to. So, the reality is when we want to stay informed and we want to raise awareness, so we're resharing posts on Instagram, or we're constantly reading the news, or Al Jazeera is in the background, you are constantly exposed to this content all the time, and our brains are not made to do that. So you need to take breaks. That's when the guilt usually creeps in, because it's like, oh, I have a privilege, I'm not there, so I can take a break, I can just turn the TV off, I can just put my phone away. They don't have that option. And that's where the guilt usually comes in. And when it comes to the guilt piece, there's an important reminder here of we were all put in different trials and tests for a reason. Your privilege, you need to use. The fact that I'm not there, the fact that I have certain privileges, I'm more helpful if I actually make my mental health a priority and figure out how I'm going to address things or what role I want to play than if I'm just bombarding myself. Because the people in Gaza have gone through this for so long. It's never going to get easy, but they have certain skills and ways of doing it. We don't have those skills. We didn't live that environment. And especially when I'm seeing visual images all the time, I can actually experience vicarious trauma. And that basically means secondhand trauma. Where when I'm seeing visual images, when I'm witnessing something that's traumatic, sometimes I'll start feeling trauma symptoms. So whether that's heightened anxiety, whether it's not being able to sleep, sometimes it's more physical, like the things Samia had mentioned. Sometimes it's running thoughts. And that's why we need to disengage from the content when we feel like it's too much and I can't calm down, and come back to it. The guilt might still be there, but the best way you're going to be helpful is if you step away and then come back. So I think the normalizing, because across the board, this is what I've seen, but also watch for your content intake. And if you are on Instagram, don't watch Fox News. I've heard a lot of people say, like, I want to know what the other side's saying. So, like, it's not going to do you any good. What you're exposed to matters. So a lot of times I've been talking to clients about this idea of we need to connect with things in moments like this that make us feel safer, because a lot of us feel the anger or the overwhelm, but we don't realize that we're actually also scared. Because when you see people that look like you or that have a similar background or similar faith being treated this way, and then see world leaders or people either minimize them or totally dismiss them or not care, it gives us a sense of fear sometimes of like, wait a second, these people don't matter. We collectively don't matter. So when I get to that point and I'm overwhelmed and I'm scared, it's important to connect with people that understand, that also advocate, that agree with me, whether it's family, whether it's community, whether it's looking at posts of people advocating, whether it's looking at posts of people going out in numbers, the hopeful stuff, not just looking at the things that are more traumatic or more negative because I'm trying to stay informed. We need to balance it out. We need connection with people, with God through prayer. Prayer was mentioned in the question. So again, I'll summarize it. It's normal. A lot of people are going through it. Watch out for your consumption because vicarious trauma is a thing. And then we need connection with people that have similar values or that understand what we're experiencing. I don't know if anyone would like to add anything. It was this question. Go ahead.
I can also like add like something there as well when it comes to even because I can notice like like within the question like yes it's like usually like one of the frequent questions is what else can I do, and usually like for that is it's noticing like the question itself is uh, like when when that question is this what else can I do, it's almost it's noticing what have I done already. Each person's form of advocacy is very different. Some people and like some would be able to advocate through like writing posts and writing articles. Some would be able to advocate through social media. Some would be able to advocate through speaking with friends. Some would like would even like would advocate by basically like reading. Like these are different pieces of actually seeing what advocacy looks like for each person. At the same time, right before advocacy would be taking care of oneself. Like that is basically like that piece. And I say that as well, like as well as a Palestinian. So like there is that piece that actually adds in more. It is not easy to be speaking about that nor alone witness it. So that's basically like a big piece of it. It is noticing as to what would be required of us, and noticing as well like the element of rahmah, like the element of mercy that is there. At the same time, yes, we would be requesting that, we would be making dua of rahmah. At the same time, that it is noticing that we ourselves as well are worthy of rahmah as well too. So it is an exchange of that, noticing how that affect. When it comes to the emotions that are there, the center of it, we would see it. It is that centered around the heart. And it is very normal like to notice all of these emotions there. At the same time, the wisdom of them being there, we would notice there are many, even many du'as that come with different emotions for a reason. Because at the first time, when we'd see that there is a du'a of sadness, when there is a du'a of fear, when there is a du'a, like when each moment that is there, there is a du'a for them. The piece that comes, when it comes to spiritual coping, it's a piece that like I notice is that what might be the reason that there is such a dua, because it's required that we identify those feelings first, that we recognize it within ourselves and recognize it within each other as well. Even when it comes to like coping itself, like as what I mentioned, when it comes to like that form of connection, like before the age of social media, basically that form of social media was social circles. We'd gather together in community. We'd have like that's a big major important piece, is seeing where else can we talk about things, where else can we have discussion, actual support. The device of connect, like the devices that we have, it granted us further ability to connect. At the same time, let us not forget to connect with those around us, because it's very easy to teleport ourselves into many different areas using the phone. At the same time, let's not forget actually of the surroundings, like that we have around us. So seeing friends that we can talk to, seeing areas where you can actually have like-hearted, like-minded areas where we can speak about it. We'd recognize, like in politics, one of these pieces that it might not be basically like that mainstream norm that's there. At the same time, that there are circles where there is actual understanding of these pieces. So it is that aspect of not to isolate oneself, which can get really easy when it comes to over the phone alone. This is the piece for that.
Well, I want to take advantage of that and I ask a question. And the question is actually for all of you, and it is really built about the subject. Many of us, especially Muslim, they do have a stigma of psychotherapy. they do have an issue of going seeking help, and they believe, unfortunately, that they can manage that. And yeah, so this issue is actually generational. It's first generation, second generation, and it's passed on. They are ashamed of a feeling, and they are ashamed of seeking help. So can you please, can I give you again the word for each one of you, and if you can shed a bit of light about the importance of psychotherapy, and again being mindful about your well-being, um, again from an Islamic perspective, but again from a clinical perspective, what is um, result of forgetting or not seeking help on that? Yeah, thank you.
I think one of the biggest things that I think you and I would talk about it a lot is how we talk about mental health, how we talk about going to like what's a psychotherapist, what's therapy, what does all of that look like? I think if it's not just from us, but from coming from a community and being able to understand it and being able to learn how to speak of it in communities will really matter. So if you're coming in and you're saying, if you're, it's, and I grew up in this spaces where people are saying, oh, you're going to see a therapist and there must be something really wrong with you. Like these are the things that we hear often in my household, at least, and I can't speak for everyone, but in my household, even when I was saying I was going to become a psychotherapist, my parents were like, why? Yeah, their reaction is always interesting. So what we've learned really quickly, specifically working with a lot of the refugees that were coming in, how we spoke about it really mattered. If we spoke about it from like, oh, mentally ill or illness or things like that, then there's a shutdown right away, right? They're like, okay, we're not even going to go there because I'm not ready to have this conversation. And it's not just that. It's not just mental. There's a difference between mental health and mental illness, right? And wellness and all of those pieces. And being able to be educated on that ourselves, to have those conversations with other and change the narrative around it, is going to make a huge difference. So whenever we go to either community settings or organizations or having conversations about mental health, we always want to talk about it so differently with so many different lived experiences so people can relate to it and be like, oh, okay, this is what it actually means. It's not just this. It's not just categorized as this. But it takes time. The stigma has been there for a very, very long time. But a part of it is educating myself on what this means, being able to learn more about it, talk to people that have knowledge around it, grab some books, read about it. Which books you grab is also important. May I just add? And from that we spread it out. I don't know if you want to.
And also like usually like a piece related to that when it comes to like within the Muslim community as well is like usually like a question that is quite often is, oh, like psychotherapy is a foreign concept. Like that's a misconception. It's more of a myth in and of itself. If we notice in like in the Quran, like there is the verse قد أفلح من زكاها. Indeed, like so it speaks about like tazkiyat nafs, the purification or working on one's soul. Psychotherapy, psycho soul therapy meaning healing. It is a lot of, it's basically working on the psyche itself. It by itself, even when it comes to the Muslim tradition itself, there is a lot of advancements that have happened already from from early from early Muslims who have done a lot of work in this area, in this field. And when it comes to like working on it, even when it comes to like ignoring it, it's like, if for example, if somebody like has a dental cavity, if they would no longer go to a dentist, what would happen? So as the cavity develops all the way to a root canal and even further infections. If the person is not willing to go to a dentist, and then there would be further more complications. It's something similar. It doesn't have to be only when it comes to cavity. It can even be in terms of actually building resiliency. So it can come in both terms, as treatment and also as strength building. So these are pieces that really would be helping with that.
I really like that point, Ahmed, because a lot of people try to see psychotherapy from a lens of like, it's a Western thing. We don't do that. We pray, we read Quran, we talk to our family members, and that's it. And it's actually not a Western concept. And historically, Muslims were the ones to develop a lot of the diagnoses. A lot of the mental health research out there was originally developed by Muslim scholars and Muslim researchers. So I love that you brought that up. I think something else that adds to the stigma is the misunderstanding of what happens in therapy. So a lot of you probably have that image of like that lying couch and someone sitting down with glasses and writing things down. Yeah, we don't have that couch in our office. Some of our clients come in and be like, "What? You don't have the couch?" And I'm like, "No, sorry." They're like, "Are you gonna get one?" I'm like, "No, we don't need it. People don't. I mean, if you want to lie down, sure." But so this idea, the stereotypical idea of therapy that we get both from pop culture. So in movies, therapists get a very bad rap. They're usually either unethical and break the laws, or they just make them kind of like quirky and weird. And in Egyptian movies specifically, therapists are horrible. Like I watch it and I'm like, if I saw this and I wasn't a therapist, I'd never see one. So there's something about educating people on what therapy actually looks like and what we do in therapy. And it's not me sitting there trying to tell you everything that's wrong with you and diagnose you. As a psychotherapist, a lot of what I'm doing is trying to essentially what we kind of did with this presentation. We have conversations about what's happening for you. We take the context into consideration, and then together we're working to see how to address some of these topics, how to explore them, what would be helpful. And sometimes it's a conversation, and in my sessions, sometimes it's something different. Sometimes we're actually doing something more hands on. Sometimes we're building something. Sometimes we're painting something. Sometimes we're writing something down. Sometimes we're actually moving around the room. So it's very specific to the client and what would be helpful. It's not so much that I'm sitting there with a notepad, and this is my approach. Some therapists write things down, but I don't write during my session. Unless you give me an important date or something I might forget, then I might jot it down. But it's more of a human connection. And I like how, Ahmed, you mentioned the dentist, you mentioned the resilience piece, because people are always shocked when therapists say they go to therapy. And when you see it as more of something that I'm accessing that will build my skills. So just like I'll go to a doctor for a certain thing, a dentist for a certain thing, I might see a personal trainer in the gym because I don't have enough knowledge of like the different muscles in my body and what I need strengthening, or I'll see a physiotherapist because she'll tell me exactly what exercise to use. It's the same thing. In moments where I'm struggling or overwhelmed, I'll see a therapist, not because something's wrong with me, I don't know how to fix it, because we get into that fix mentality. It's more of, oh, I need support with this, or there's a skill that I'm missing and I need someone to help me dig into it. So as a therapist, I go to therapy. And that's an important piece of normalizing it, getting people to know what the therapy room actually looks like and not what they have in their minds or how you've seen it on TV. It's really not how you see it on TV.
One small thing, just adding to what Wala said, a lot of people think that therapy is just talk therapy. You go in and you talk about your problems and things like that. I'm a very creative person, so just this idea before becoming a therapist, just this idea of going to a room and someone asking me questions about what's happening in my life feels very intimidating. So therapy doesn't always have to be talk therapy. It could be creative arts, it could be journaling, it could be writing, and that's how you get the context. And I have a lot of clients that were very resistant to coming to therapy. They're just intimidated. They're like, I don't want to sit here and you ask me questions and I don't even know how to even start this conversation. Um, One thing that I want to add in terms of therapy as well is that it's a human connection, right? So finding a good fit really matters. And that takes time, and it's okay for you to kind of dig in a little bit. And I always say those consultations that therapists give you at the beginning, which typically is a 15-20 minute consultation, take advantage of it, ask questions, make sure that you're feeling comfortable with the person, because the person could be a great therapist, but the connection might not be there. Right? I think that's all I wanted to say. Here you go.
Well, it is
There's one question.
one question. Okay, okay. Yes, we'll go question, then we'll close it.
Okay, so there's a question here that says, as a Muslim psychotherapist, what kind of therapy practices do you like to go for to heal Muslim clients when it comes to trauma, spiritual awakening, and personal development? Who wants to tackle this first? You wanna go?
So like when it comes to that, like at times, so like from the approaches, it's usually would be combining, like from many different approaches. It would not be only one approach at the same, and that would work. Different people, they would benefit from different combinations, basically. For some, they'd be more creative. For some, they'd be more cognitive or more intellectual. And like some would like to be more writing. In that case, there are different elements. There is also like the ability to integrate, like value-based, like in therapy, or even strength-based in therapy, or even like elements that would be like typing about, like spiritually integrated therapy. These are different aspects that are there. Essentially, like it would like there's a lot of work and like being done to notice. It's like there's a lot of like places of interaction and a lot of intersection that would essentially be tapping into like ultimately like the person's own like heart, the person's own fitra, and these elements that are there. These are concepts that there is research done about it, and there is also a lot of intersection between different modalities. So and very importantly, it would be like this is to make sure that to not forget the importance of the actual relationship between you and the therapist. That would be the very most important piece before whichever modalities that are used.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a specific approach. I think how you navigate therapy, regardless of the approach, where you actually incorporate the values and take the client's lead on what spirituality means to them, how they practice religion, and make sure you incorporate that into therapy is how I do it. It's not a specific approach for Muslims.
Well, on that note, it's Maghrib time, but I would like to warmly thank our panelists, Samia, Wala, and Ahmed, for their time. It was a much needed topic for our community, and indeed, mental health is one of the topic that has a huge stigma. But I hope that this session has helped, clearing some of the misconception, stereotypes, and misunderstanding about seeking help. And again, dentist, lawyer, any profession, sometimes we need someone to take care of our mental state and so on. So thank you so much for attendance. Jazakumullah khairan. I have some treats for those who attended, and if you take any of my pens, please, I want them back. Thank you.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بارك الله فيكم أجمعين, and thank you very much for the wonderful session. I learned a lot personally, so thank you for that. Mental health is not an easy task. It is a very difficult on us as culture and as immigrants, basically. But we need to fight it, and we need to know how to fix our own self. Thank you again, Ahmed, for the help. Barakallah fiki. Thank you, Samia, and the engine behind this session, our doctor. Thank you all. I will see you again in more session business. Assalamu alaikum.